Hi, and welcome to Ask Me Anything Office Hours with Ruby. I'm Dan Marek, Director of Plant Based Culinary. I'm here 2 weeks in a row, which is a little unusual for us. Would you like to switch up our hosts? But we had a little bit of a switch around, so I hope you'll bear with me this week. During our Ask Me Anything hours, we open up questions to all of our students to basically put anything as far as questions that they have around culinary up, and our chefs answer them live on air. Now you can do that actually just by clicking in your question in the question box there. Type in your question, hit add. Our moderator, Patrick, will go through it to make sure that it's culinary related or at least specific to our field. Mine specifically is plant based culinary. Um, and then it'll show up with on the right hand side. There are little heart icons next to it. So if you hit the heart icon, it'll actually move it further up in the queue. So we'll answer it first if you'd like to do that. But usually we have time to be able to get through them all. If we don't, we always email you afterward with the response. So with that being said, welcome, and let's jump right into our questions. Our first question is from Sharon. Which spices can you cook vegetables with to replace salt and add flavor? So this is actually a common question when people are talking about whole food plant-based diets is salt. So you can use salt. It's just a lot of cooks overuse salt. In fact, in culinary school, it's pretty a lot of people add way too much salt for what most whole food plant-based eaters are used to. Now, salt is okay to be able to have, but you don't want to go overboard on it. So, when I'm cooking, I typically don't even cook with it. Now, my kind of saying, when I was at a restaurant, was that there's a salt shaker on every table in America. People want to add salt to it. They definitely can. The palate actually completely switches over in about 7 days. So, if you go without salt for 7 days, you'll see at the beginning of that, you'd have a much higher tolerance for salt. But after 7 days of eating no salt, it completely go away. So my clientele at the restaurants that I was cooking at typically were on the very low end. So I just typically didn't use salt at all. Now, to get around that, to be able to add more flavor, I would use the freshest ingredients possible. Now, that being said, I would have to buy them in season and prepare them fairly quickly after being bought or cultivated as well. It's really, if you kind of look at that in season kind of a thing, so like tomatoes are probably the best example of that. If you eat a tomato in the middle of, say, January in the Midwest of the United States, it's not going to really taste too much like a tomato because it has been grown very far away. It has been picked when it was still green and then basically modified to be able to make it so it's red and ripe by the time it gets to the grocery store. That can take quite a long time to get to the store. So that whole time it's decomposing, it's losing its flavor as well. Now, right now, we're starting to see in the Midwest tomatoes right off the vine from farmers, and they're amazing and have great flavor. Now, that is a great example of using things that are in season to be able to get big flavor. So, the more you can do that, the bigger flavor you're going to get. Now, if it's out of season, some other things that I actually recommend are using fresh herbs and fresh herbs if possible. So, going things towards basil, fresh cilantro, parsley, those kinds of things, dill, all things that can actually be grown in an indoor garden fairly easily, or a lot of farmers can continue to do those and cultivate those in the middle of the winter on an indoor growing garden or something like that. Now, those are great things to be able to add big flavor to dishes without using salt, is using fresh herbs and then also using ingredients when they're in season as much as possible. So I hope that helps, Sharon. Shar Nolan, great friend here. Great to see you again. Happy Tuesday, Dan. With school coming up very soon, what are some of your lunchbox favorite for your daughters? So I had mentioned this before that chickpea salad is one of their favorites. And it's kind of like the mock tuna one that we do, but the chickpea salad that I do for them is usually a cashew cream with chickpeas and pickles, or in a pinch, I'll use a vegan mayo to be able to make it kind of quick. That's definitely one of their favorites to be able to have in lunches. But I do diversify that up quite a bit with a lot of their favorite snacks. They're big fans of seaweed as well. Usually not mixed in with the chickpea salad, but they'll just have the little seaweed strips. They've just recently been getting into sushi now that they're making it themselves as well, which is great. So really kind of switching it up with things that they can be involved with to get them kind of used to some of the foods that you're making for dinners, and then including those into the lunches as well. I'm also a very huge advocate of school lunches as well, and trying to get school lunches to be the best and most flavorful, farm sourced, really scratch cooking schools as well, or getting those school lunches to schools. I've been working in that avenue for many, many years and still do that here in Wisconsin. And so I do make a point that we do at least 2 days per week as a school lunch to be able to help support the system as well. Now, that can be a little hard for some families, especially if they're whole food plant based. My kids are not 100% whole food plant based, but they are vegetarian, which makes it a lot easier for us. And all I have to do is basically go through the menu items for each day to see which one works best for them, and then pick out the one that works best, and then explain to them what they're going to get for lunch that day. So they actually know if it's going to be a veggie burger on a bun or something like that, or be able to look for what they're to look for the food that they're looking for. So, a couple of things. Do love to be able to do our normal diets of things that they're used to at home, to be able to make them easy to be able to eat at home with not a lot of mess. Because parents out there, they go to school in a white t-shirt and they come back and there's pasta sauce all over the front. It's very easy to do. So, sometimes we have to dress accordingly depending on what they're eating for lunch at the same time. But again, just really going back to things that they're used to, that they're going to enjoy, that they're going to eat. I know sushi and a lunch for some public schools is a little odd. I did the same thing when I was a kid, and it was a little odd, but I turned out okay. So, but just exposing them to a lot of things too. I also try to put in just one something little different in each one as well, just a small taste. Usually that's something we do at home, but sometimes I'll do it in the lunch too, just to see what they think. All right, great seeing you there, Sharon, I really love pizza. How can I have a vegan pizza with no cheese? We do this actually every week. On Friday nights are typically our pizza night for our family, and we do a no cheese pizza. I typically will make a tofu ricotta to be able to add to the top of it, which is great. Sometimes in a pinch, we'll use some of the vegan cheese shreds or something like that. But I'm not a big fan of the flavor of those as much, so I usually try to make a ricotta if possible. Now, the ricotta is just an easy thing to be able to do. We have lots of recipes on Ruby for it. I think in the plant-based pro course, but it's basically just a tofu that you blend up with a little bit of nutritional yeast, some lemon juice, in there. You can put some garlic seasoning, maybe an Italian seasoning in there, and just blend that up, and you have a great vegan ricotta. Super simple to be able to make. You can put it in dollops with an ice cream scoop on top if that's the way you're used to having your ricotta. I usually will just kind of put it as kind of a layer over the top, but not cover the entire pizza with it, but just kind of put it in little crumbles over the top as well. Adds a great flavor, great protein source as well too. So that's typically how I do that. Also, for years, we just did no cheese on it as well, where we did like a caramelized onion or something like that, and then did roasted tomatoes. So you can do all kinds of really flavorful ingredients for the top of it and just not have a cheese or cheese substitute at all. Deborah, I'd like to try to make nut milk. I've seen several types of straining bags and even a special nut making machine. Do you have a preference or a specific recommendation? Do you ever toast the nuts? I typically do not toast the nuts at all. Um, and as far as my own preference, I'm usually going to use a straining bag to make a nut milk. They do have wonderful nut making or nut milk making machines, but they're quite expensive. And being a single use item, I'm typically not going to have that in my house just because it's like, a rice maker is probably the extent of that, but I don't actually use my rice maker that much either. So usually, if it's just kind of a one and done kind of a thing, tool, um, I usually try to steer away from those a little bit more. And nut milk making machine is so specific. I just never bothered to be able to get one. So what I would do instead is actually just, well, soak the nuts and grind them as well in a Vitamix, then use a straining bag as well. You do need to get very fine. They have specific straining bags for nut milks. So you do want to be able to look out for those. A cheesecloth is okay, but it's really going to let some of the other finer particulars through. So yeah, but I will typically use it's a straining bag for that as well. All right, Sheila. For the veggie burgers, what are the proportions of the ingredients? Equal? So, depending on your recipe, Sheila, it will have different proportions. I've never seen a veggie burger that had equal parts of everything. Your spices are typically going to be a smaller amount. You might do like a lentil or a bean or rice, and those all have different ways to be able to prepare those, depending on how they hold together, how much moisture is in the ingredient, the spices that are coming from those as well. So I would just encourage you to find a good veggie burger recipe to try out, to be able to experiment with, and then you can experiment with afterward to be able to see, what proportions you want to make if you're looking to make your own. All right, Deborah, I'm concerned about salt intake. I've noticed salt being an ingredient used in vegan cooking. Should I be concerned about that? Do Ruby recipes have nutrient info? Pardon me. So salt is included in a lot of recipes. It's actually in a lot of the Ruby recipes, it's a much lower amount than would be in other recipes. So if you're doing a non-whole food plant-based diet, you're going to find that there's a lot of salt in those. At a typical culinary school, it's fat and salt are two of the things you add to be able to add flavor. So you'll find that a lot of things have a lot of salt. Restaurants, in particular, have very high salt contents, and so you do want to pay attention to that nutrient info. The Ruby recipes don't actually have nutrient info. There are a few that do, but most of them do not. So feel free to omit the sugar or the salt on those, or actually just do much less. And just like anything else, you can add a little bit and then add as time goes to be able to see if you're getting the correct flavor that you want on that. Julie, can I use my cooking experience for a graded exam, even if the experience was not a positive one? The dish turned out badly, but it was still a learning opportunity. Yeah, of course, Julie, you can use, and we have a lot of students that will submit something like that. So they go through the steps and they try to make it, but it didn't quite turn out the way they wanted to. And the final dish is as we'd asked it to be made, but they didn't like the flavor of it, or something happened a little wrong on it. Pardon me. But you're getting the learning experience out of it anyways. So it's a great thing to be able to submit for that. Just make sure that you detail out where things went wrong on it. Right. So if something does happen and it's like, oh, I burnt this, or I didn't like the flavor on this in particular, like the flavor part is like, we're not really concerned with that as much. It's like, okay, like you didn't quite like the taste of garam masala because it had a clove in it, right? So that's understandable. If you don't like clove and you know, uh, I don't know, the pho broth had a clove in it, you might not like the broth out of that, but you actually follow all the steps through it and you made it perfectly. Other family members like it, but you particularly didn't like it yourself. That's fine. If it's a burnt dish or something like that, well, you might not get full marks on it. But as long as you're describing the process and exactly what you did with it and how you know it went wrong, our instructors typically take that into account. So, can you, use the experience for the exam, even if it wasn't a positive one? Yes, you totally can. Now, depending if it turned out badly, like out of flavor, that's kind of to be determined. If it comes out where it's like a disaster, where it just didn't work out at all, like it's either burnt or the whole thing collapsed or something like that, that's kind of by the basis, like kind of seeing, or by you know, it's basically per dish to be able to see how that works out. But feel free to do that. And if the instructor's like, this is not what we're looking for, you can always submit to the Supreme Court to be able to redo the dish too. But if you've already taken all the steps through it, you might as well submit it, see how it does. And then from that learning opportunity, you can again do it easier or better the next time too. All right, Sharon, how do you get the most flavor out of sauteing mushrooms? So there's a couple different ways to be able to do this. Like when I'm sauteing mushrooms, I'm typically starting out with either an onion mix and onion with mushrooms, but I'm going to get them sauteing down. I love to deglaze the pan. So the final step when we're doing a no oil mushroom is deglazing with water, just a tablespoon or two, to be able to get all the brown off the bottom of the pan back into the mushrooms. I typically love to do the last deglazing, which is a little bit of white wine, be able to add just a whole different dynamic and depth to the flavor of the dish. A lot of people will say, "Oh, you use cheap wine." I'm not a very big advocate of that at all. Think that you should use a wine to cook with that you're going to drink as well, especially if you're just drinking a bottle of wine or something with dinner. You can deglaze with that same wine to be able to add a huge amount of flavor to those mushrooms as well. I hope that helps. Sharon, how can I fry peppers and other vegetables without adding all the fat from oils? I eat more peppers and zucchini when they're battered and fried. So, yeah, um, you typically, frying, you're going to add a fat to it. So, the other example that I would say would be to do like a saute, like I was just talking about, like the mushrooms. There's a wonderful example on this for the Forks Over Knives or the Plant Based Pro course. If you're not in either of those, there's a free how to lesson on the Forks Over Knives sample that you can check out to be able to see how to do the saute with no oil at all. It's actually a very easy process. It works out really, really well. And the flavor is really big too. So I would start with that and kind of build up from there. You can also do the saute on the vegetables beforehand, and you can still bread something like that. If you're, battering something, you can still do like a aquafaba batter or, and then dip it in breadcrumbs or something like that, and then bake it off to be able to get that crunchiness that that's what you're looking for too. So a couple different steps to it, but still getting a great flavor outcome. Mary, have you had any thoughts on how to make buttermilk substitute that has a similar flavor profile as buttermilk? I'm asking because I love the flavor and would love to be able to replicate it. Yeah, so buttermilk is actually just an easy thing to be able to do. What you just want to start out with is just basically your nut milk and then add a little bit of lemon to that. You'll actually start to see it curdle a little bit. That's actually what the buttermilk is. It's a great buttermilk substitute. And you should be able to use that in the same way you're using other things. Good for pancakes, all kinds of things like that as well too. Just don't add too much lemon to it. Just a little bit goes a long way for it, and you don't want to overpower the flavor of the nut milk to be able to get the lemon flavor out. It's Mary again. Can I use aquafaba to make a souffle? You absolutely can. Like different recipes call for different amounts of aquafaba, but yes, aquafaba will absolutely work in a souffle, and I've seen it and done it myself. It works wonderfully. Sheila, can you freeze the cashew bechamel? You can. I've done it and it's frozen and been okay, but you do have to worry about the water separating out a little bit, and you do want to make sure you're not freezing it for too long. When you thaw it, you just want to make sure to be able to blend it again afterward to be able to get all the solids and the water that will come out of it blend it up again. You might need to add a little bit of water or vegetable stock afterward too to be able to get the right texture on it as well. But it will freeze. Just don't freeze it for more than, say, 3 to 4 months. It'd probably be something I would watch out for. All right, Sheila. What is sambal leek? Sambal is it's a hot sauce basically. Now it's I think it's Indonesian, and it is typically a red pepper of some sort. It usually has ginger, garlic, lemongrass in it as well too. It is quite spicy, but very good. So, like a sriracha that most people are used to in the a red bottle with the green top is usually garlic flavored with red chili. The lemongrass and the ginger add a different dynamic to it, which is super good. Great flavor to it. Also very spicy. So watch how much you use. After this course is over, is there somewhere I can get all the recipes? There's several I want to make in the future. Yes. So even at the top of this window that we're watching right now, you can look at the top and you'll see right next to the live events where it says on air. Right at the moment, you can see there's a tab that says recipes. And if you hit that recipe tab, it'll take you to all the different recipes that are allocated to the course that you are taking. We do have quite a lot more recipes, and you might be able to see because the recipes come with the course that you buy. So if you're buying the Forks Over Knives recipe, or you're buying the Forks Over Knives course, say the Ultimate course, you'll get all the recipes that are included in that. But you might not get all the recipes that are in the Plant Pro course. They don't swap over. But if you did start taking the Plant Based Pro course, all the recipes from that would show up in your search as well. So wonderful way to be able to revisit some of the recipes you were looking into as well. There are also some in there that are just like, for free from other courses as well that we've included just as a general catalog too. All right, Jimmy, how do you balance creativity with consistency when cooking for clients in professional setting? That is a wonderful question. So the the consistency is a big part of it, right? So a lot of times people will come back to you because they love to dish and they're like, I love this thing. I'm always going to get that thing. And if it changes, I'm disappointed. In fact, that just happened to me this weekend when my mom was in town. We went to a local restaurant here where we loved a pasta dish. And it wasn't quite made the same this time when we went. And we'd been going for years and loved this one dish. And this one dish was not the same anymore. So we were a little disappointed at it. Now, it's okay to change a couple things to it, but if it's like a staple dish of yours, you should still have that staple dish on there. But you might do like maybe a different side dish or a different, garnish to it or something like that. Is a great way to be able to add a little bit of creativity. You can also pair it with something else. So if it's a certain dish that comes like you can, here's the regular dish. You can say it also comes with this, say this bread or this side of a bruschetta or something like that to be able to explore other things. So you can have just a small sampling of something like that to be able to encourage them to go towards something else. So if it's a pasta dish and it comes with a bruschetta garnish, it's very small, and you also have that bruschetta as an appetizer, they're more likely to be able to order that the next time they come into it. Now, if you're doing for clients where it's like a regular, like if you're like a personal chef, what I would do is I would do all the regular meals that I would make for them, but I'd add one new thing per week to be able to give it. Because a lot of times when you're a personal chef, you do have clients that are like, I love this, I love this, I love this and this, and that's what I want for the week. Those are my 5 dishes or 7 dishes or whatever that I want to be able to have. And as a chef, that kind of gets boring a little bit, right? So a lot of times I would just, complimentary give another offering of something else for them to be able to try and say, like, here, this is this new thing. I want you to try it. Tell me what you think about it. And then maybe next time they'll order it from you as an item on the menu. So I hope that helps, Jimmy. Maria, when taking a blanched food such as broccoli, what can you do to maintain its bright green pigment when you go to reheat it just before serving? So, good question. So, when you're blanching something like broccoli, you typically do want to give it an ice bath to be able to give it that bright green appearance afterward. Now, afterward, you can just put it right into something like your stir fry or something like that. And you just put it in kind of at the end to be able to heat it back up kind of quickly, and it'll still retain that bright pigment. But the important part is after you blanched it, put it in the ice bath to be able to retain the flavor or the flavor as well, but also the pigment on it. Well, and then afterward, just put it in towards the end of a dish instead of having it like stew in it for hours and hours, and then you'll still have that bright green hue. Robert, related to salt, how much salt should be added to cook a whole wheat pasta? Does it matter whether it is coarse or fine grain? I suspect it does. So, um, s with salt, this is kind of funny because this is one of the areas in salt that I'm a firm believer that you get more flavor cooking pasta when your water is well salted. And that comes from a lot of back and forth on different things, but I do well salt my water while I'm cooking pasta in it. Does that add salt content to my pasta? Of course it does. So there isn't a specific amount of salt that I would say to be able to put into it. A lot of people say your water should taste like the ocean. That's a bit much for me. For me to say like 8 to 10 cups of water, I might put a tablespoon of salt in. And for me, that's a lot of salt, a tablespoon. And that works out really well and just gives another added dynamic to the flavor of that. Now, that's to the water. If you're talking about to be able to put it on the whole wheat pasta, as it's after you boiled it and stuff like that. That's a different thing, and that's just kind of a personal preference. In fact, both ways are a personal preference. But I do like to heavily salt my water, and as I'm cooking pasta to be able to get a big flavor. Coarse versus non. It's probably going to come out the same way because it's basically absorbing all of that water into it. I also, depending on the noodle, will sometimes cook my noodles in a vegetable stock too to be able to add big flavor. When I'm doing that, I don't actually add salt to it at all because it has such a big flavor on it just on its own. I'll typically reuse the vegetable stock in make it into a soup because then it has some more depth to it, getting some of the pasta out of that as well too. All right, Cecilia, why are the nutritional data not available in the forks over knives recipe? So they're typically not on any of the recipes for Ruby. So that is a whole process you have to do after a recipe, submit it to a nutritionist, and go through. So there isn't any nutritional data on the recipes. I think there were only sets for a one course. I think it was a doctor's course where it was something where they provided the recipes and the nutritional information, and that is the reason we actually included nutritional data for those recipes. But by and large, the majority of recipes on Ruby do not have nutritional data on them. Maria, do you think that the whole food plant based movement is here to stay? I absolutely do. It's great to be able to see it becoming more mainstream. I've been in that movement for about 25 years now, maybe a little bit more. So it is good to be able to see it becoming more mainstream. In fact, I was just reading an article earlier today, like mushrooms in particular are expected to go up they've gone up in the last year by 40% in sales, which is wonderful. In the past 3 years, the whole food plant based market has gone up by 80%, which is fantastic. And we are seeing an upward movement in that. The great thing is you're also seeing other large institutions like the American Heart Association and different organizations like that saying that a whole food plant based diet is definitely the healthiest way to be able to eat. Now, those were big ships that were very hard to turn. For years, they would offer on their websites, like, here's the meatloaf you should eat for your heart, and it's like that doesn't make any sense. So it's great to be able to see that it's big organizations are actually turning towards the whole food plant-based diet as well too. So I do think it's here to stay, and I can't wait to see all the other things that kind of hop out of it with so many new people involved and interested. Denise, last week you mentioned the tuna salad sandwich for your family as a favorite. I made it as a real winner and soon to be my go-to. Can you think of any other family favorite dishes? Yeah. So there are a couple things with this. In fact, I put a link down here. The jackfruit barbecue is one of those, which is a great one where you basically shred jackfruit. You can also do it with mushrooms as well. You can put a barbecue sauce if you're choosing into it and make those into tacos. A wonderful way to be able to make those. Other family kind of favorites too. They're a big fan of dal. So, there's a lot of different kinds of dal. They're a big fan of the black lentil typically. And I'll usually do a couple kidney beans or something in that as well too. But I'll usually do just a lentil, bean, and rice mixture, which is wonderful. I change that recipe up all the time though. I'll also do a chana masala for them as well that they do love. I'll do it very, very mild for them. They were born in Texas, and they definitely can handle heat more than most kids. But even at our local Indian restaurant, we go super mild for those. So, but yeah, for kid wise though, and they're involved with those things too. So adding all the different seasonings to the dish, adding the lentils to the pot, and just try to make them as much involved with the food as possible. I'd mentioned earlier that we just recently started doing sushi too. It's a great kind of hands-on activity. My youngest loves sushi. My oldest is not so keen on it. So we make a rice bowl for her using the sushi rice and then all the ingredients kind of laid around the top. She just doesn't like in the sushi form, which is fine. So she gets a rice bowl instead. Hope that helps just a little bit, Denise. Maria, retaining vibrant green color from blanched broccoli. Please answer again. My computer shorted out. Yes. So you basically want to, and just so you know, Maria, you can always go back. We do record these. So just in case you do miss one, but retaining the vibrant green color, after you blanch the broccoli, put it into an ice bath. Make sure it's cooled down in that ice bath and you get that really bright green color to be able to stay and it doesn't continue cooking anymore as if you just kept it in the pot. When you're ready to put it into something else, just heat it up at the end, right? So if you're making a stir fry, put it at the end of your stir fry so it heats up, but it doesn't continue to cook a lot. Definitely don't put it in something like a soup or a stew where it's going to cook for an hour or two as well. So put it right in at the end of a dish. If it is going to be in a soup or stew, put it right at the end as well too. Chris, my question is about what type of skillet is best for cooking on an induction stove. I have stainless steel, but food, with the exception of meats, always sticks if not using plenty of oil. So, a lot of different skillets should be able to work on that. Your steel skillet should work just fine on that. Your stainless steel should be fine. What you might want to do is make sure you're getting it to the right heat. So, In that same video we're talking about for the free lesson for forks over knives, showing how to cook without oil using the mushroom technique, you do want to get your pan to a specific heat so you can actually see the bead kind of floating around the top of the skillet, kind of like a mercury ball. Once you get to that point, you know that it's at the right heat. If you put water into it and it just instantly turns into a puff of smoke, it's too hot. If it just sits there and doesn't do anything else, you know it's too cold. So it's right at that right point to be able to get it so it doesn't stick on those. So yeah, and meat probably wouldn't, because of the fat that's coming out of those is acting as your nonstick as well too. So I hope that helps, Chris. And I think you're talking about a whole food plant-based diet. If not, just a little bit of oil on the bottom and then wipe it out with a paper towel. So that way you have very small amount of oil and you're just making a non-stick surface in your steel pan too. So, but if you're doing whole food plant-based, it's very important to be able to get that exact temperature in your pan. Robert, I have having difficulty finding any sort of real variety in whole wheat pastas where I live. Can you recommend an online vendor that not only supplies a large variety of whole grain pastas? Huh. I can't, off the top of my head, recommend an online ordering. Fortunate enough to be able to have a couple stores that have plenty of whole wheat offerings near me. That, yeah, so I can't really recommend an online ordering place that would do that. I'm sure there are a lot out there, and a little bit of research would definitely help with that. You might also want to join the Facebook group for Ruby for the course you're in. If you're a whole food plant based, there's one for that as well. And if you ask the hive mind, if you will, they'll probably have a lot of great recommendations. Scott, what are some excellent resources for transforming a home recipe into a dish suitable for restaurant or catering? Um, there's not too much of a leap there. The way I cook, I would serve at a restaurant. The thing about restaurant or catering dishes for recipes is that you have to do it bigger, right? So you have to do a lot more. So one of the important things to remember that is to be able to have dishes that use the same ingredients, and you'll be able to swap things in and out really easy. So like onions is a great example of that. You're going to put onions in, like, say, 50% of the dishes you're actually cooking. So you'll have those all sliced up and ready to go, or diced. So you'll be able to kind of grab them and quickly put them into the dish as you're going, and you create a line basically at the restaurant. I do the same thing in my refrigerator. So I have, usable things all chopped up and ready to go in my fridge. So I can just grab them, put them in the pan, and easily cook them pretty quickly. But yeah, as far as restaurant and home cooking, I guess my family is pretty fortunate because I cook like I cook at a restaurant at my home. That's the way I do it. And if that's one of the reasons we don't actually go to restaurants very often, is because they don't do it as well as I would do it at my own house. And my kids and my wife agree with me. That's just like, well, I'd rather have the way you do that instead. So I think that that's probably the best thing, is to adapt your recipes that you're cooking at home as an experiment for a restaurant or catering. Just think of it in a bigger scale and how you're going to replicate things on a bigger scale in the restaurant or catering business. I hope that helps and answers your question, Scott. Robert, so many recipes use onions. What if you have a family member who hates onions? Can harmony be achieved without cooking multiple dishes? Yeah. So if you have somebody that hates onions, I've had clients that do that as well too. It's just one of those things. Like, if you have somebody who doesn't like cilantro too, it's just best to be able to not use that ingredient for the greater good. To be able to make the one person happy, not using the onions. Some people might like them, but that's just part of the way it goes. You can, if you really like the flavor, make a separate dish of onions and add them into it as well too. Or you can cook a dish to a point, take out their serving that they're going to feed the person without the onions, and then add a cooked onion to the dish for everybody else too, to be able to kind of marinate those flavors into a little bit. Hope that helps, Robert. Chris, my question is about what type of skillet is best for cooking on an induction stove. I think we already answered this one. Yep. Scott, can you explain how best to prep and store items for service? Um, Oh, so Scott, you're the one who was asking about the restaurant versus the home. So, the best way for prep, I'm guessing you're saying this at a restaurant, is I'll just say for both, So basically the way to be able to prep and store is to be able to slice and dice your items. Maybe you can slice them and marinate them, but then put them into a sealable container and put the date on them. And then you have them in your fridge, either at a restaurant or at home. You know exactly when you cut them up. You know how long they're going to last because you did that, and then you can pull them out for service to be able to make that happen. Um, Most items after you cut them will need to be refrigerated as well. So do take heed to that. So if you're doing something like tomato, if you're using it for service, you're typically not going to slice a bunch of tomatoes and put them in the fridge because it meets the flavor unless you bring them up to room temperature before serving. So do keep temperature in mind as well. Alice, I peel my chickpeas. Am I losing nutrition by peeling them? You're losing a little bit of fiber when you're peeling them, but I wouldn't worry about too much. I mean, if you're eating the chickpeas just to be able to, you're getting the nutrition that you would want to get out of them. You are losing a little bit of fiber if you're peeling them, but I wouldn't worry about that too much, Alice. Kema, if serving fruit as a snack, what can be paired with it to limit the insulin spike? Would a whole wheat cereal work? I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question, Kema. Yeah, chef, not a doctor, so not sure how to limit the insulin spike after that. So I can't really answer that one. Sorry, but I can refer you. Well, yeah, I can't refer you to that either because they wouldn't be able to answer that either. But sorry about that. Robert, how does Ruby manage to effectively review and grade submissions when there's so many students? What is the process used? That's a great question, Robert. So we have a whole bunch of different chefs that are working for us that have expertise in all kinds of different fields. Um, for some of us, that's all we do is just be an instructor. And we just grade basically every day. New ones come in. And for others like myself or like Shar, we have other things that we do for Ruby. So my expertise is in plant-based. So I do a lot of recipes in plant-based, but I also help to build courses for Ruby. And that's my main job at Ruby. And I typically grade a couple days a week. For Shar, she does a lot of our social media as well, along with a bunch of other things. So they all wear a lot of different hats. But the review process is we have a queue that basically comes up every single day. And when new assignments come in, we read everybody's assignments and look through all the pictures and then give the grade basically on that. And then if it's was a dispute with it, there's a Supreme Court, we usually bring it back to the person that graded it and they approve or deny that as well, and then grade it in the same way. But yeah, so we have a lot of different chefs working on staff that take the time to be able to go through each one of those and write back individual answers to all of the assessments. Hope that helps, Robert. Annie, I found a Barilla one ingredient pasta rotini and penne. Red lentil flour, acceptable? That's a great one. I know, Robert, you were looking for, Barilla is a great brand too. Their whole wheats. That's typically what I'm finding at my grocery store is a Barilla. And do love that one as a whole grain as well. Their red lentil flour is pretty darn good. So I hope that helps. Thanks, Annie, for helping out on that one. Robert, for forks over knives, whole food plant-based cooking, what blender would you recommend, especially for to cream nuts, etc.? So a lot of people might not like this answer, but the the Vitamix is probably the standard for that. And the reason I'm saying a lot of people might not like the answer for that is because it's an expensive blender. When I first started my whole food plant-based catering, I was actually working for John Mackey, who started Whole Foods Market. I used to make nut creams and stuff like that all the time, and I would go through blenders like crazy. In fact, when I was catering at his house one time, he saw me having struggles with this um, going through blenders like crazy. And what was happening was burn out the motor on it. So he bought me a Vitamix as a payment slash tip for the event that I was working for him. And I've never gone back because they just work perfectly for that. Now there are other ones that kind of work, like I think there's like a Ninja one and there's There's one that's more available in Europe that like also heats stuff up at the same time. I can't think of the name at the moment. But yeah, by and large, Vitamix is kind of the go-to standard if you are going to do like the bechamels or the cream, the nuts and stuff like that as well too. So otherwise, you can go with a cheaper blender. You just need to go in segments, right? So what would happen to me was I'd use one, I'd go, and then it would stop because the motor would get overheated. I would have to wait for the motor to cool down for 30 minutes and then use it again. So it was a much longer process. And sometimes it would smell like burnt motor, which is not good. So yeah, Vitamix is kind of the go-to standard. Robert, does the Forks Overnight Ultimate course that I am in teach us how to sharpen and maintain our knives at home? Just started this course on Sunday. It does. There's a nice section on it. It's great. Using a whetstone is definitely the best way to be able to do that. There are other methods like electric sharpeners and stuff like that too. I highly recommend keeping your knives as sharp as possible. In fact, I myself am guilty of having dull knives at the moment and keep saying I need to just set a day aside where I'm actually sharpening all of them. As you can guess, I have a lot of knives. So it takes me a lot longer to be able to sharpen them all instead of just sharpening a couple. But keep them sharp, they'll keep you safe. The best knife is a sharp one, is always what I say. All right, Kama, what is the best way to cook raw black beans after being soaked? An instant pot to be flavorful and not overcooked. And in Instant Pot is a great way to be able to cook black beans. After you're soaking them, put them in there, cover them with water. There are different recommendations for Instant Pots depending on the ones you have. Um, and there are lots of different, depending on the recipe and what you're cooking, there are great things that you can just Google black bean, how long to cook, depending on which Instant Pots you have as well too. But I typically for black beans, will put a little kombu in it, which is just a little bit of seaweed in the bottom of them. It helps release some of the natural gases in them after soaking them as well too. We'll cover it with water and cook it for about an hour, hour and 10 minutes, depending on how long I've soaked them for as well too. But lots of different recipes out there on how to make the best black beans and what you want to add to them, because a lot of people just add onions and other flavors to them as they're cooking them, so the beans absorb that flavor too. All right, I hope that helped, and thank you for joining us at the Ask Me Anything office hours. I hope you learned something today. You had a lot of great questions, and we'll see you next time. Have a wonderful day.